Oh, if you guys in the back who are all yapping away can not talk at all, that'd be great. Yappers, guys, can you move it? If you want to yap, can you move into another room? Thanks. So come on closer. My name is Daniel Pinchbeck. I'm the author of 2 books, Breaking Open the Head and 2012, The Return of Quetzalcoatl. I'm assuming that some people here have read my work or are familiar with it, because I'm going to give a talk later on this afternoon where I'll kind of more, systemically present how, my work and how I think about stuff and why I'm here. But in this session, my understanding was that it was kind of like a question and answer and a little bit of an opportunity for people who are here to just raise issues that they're deeply concerned with in relationship to this subject matter. So we have 2 mics set up on the sides here. Does anybody want to start with a question or something that an issue that's haunting them? We've got mics on both sides. Or do you want me to just keep talking until you suddenly feel inspired to speak about something? All right. My book 2012, I looked at the phenomenon from a really large range of angles and perspectives. I came at it through shamanism. How many people here know my books, my work? So most of you do, okay. So, I came at the whole concept of 2012 through psychedelics and shamanism. In my first book, Breaking Open the Head, I wrote about tribal use of psychedelic substances, kind of the history of the modern Western's relationship to indigenous knowledge systems, indigenous spirituality, and then particularly the psychedelic experience, shamanic, non-ordinary states of consciousness. And in the process of writing that first book, I had enough experiences personally and then also collected material anecdotally to convince me that the Western knowledge system, the modern rational scientific knowledge system was flawed, and that there were aspects of these indigenous cultures in this kind of shamanic worldview that were valid, and that in a way we were under a bit of a threat in the modern world because we had negated and suppressed these other aspects of being and these other aspects of awareness that these tribal and traditional people and myth-based people know about so well. And that led me to think about what do all these people say about the time that we're in now, or what do they feel that their stories and their science in a sense is telling them about this time. And then I found that there seems to be a very consistent understanding among different cultures that this is this time of great transformation, earth changes, and so on. And of all the cultures that seem to have some understanding of this, it seems possible that the classical Maya civilization had the most developed sort of technical understanding, especially around the date of this transition. Now one thing that I try to do in my own way of looking at this whole thing is I don't pretend to know the truth or have the answer. I consider everything I'm doing as a kind of thought experiment, hypothesis, kind of like looking over, exploring a vast amount of material and data, and then doing the best I can to kind of synthesize it to my own understanding and then share it. So for me, it's like an evolving process, and not about me or anybody trying to force some belief system onto people, So I think if we step back from wondering or worrying about what the Mayans or any civilization say about the time, we can see that we're going through an extraordinary and rapid transformation process as a global community. You could maybe say the human family in itself is going through a transformation development process. And the last few months obviously have been very significant in terms of what's happening in the global economic system. And for me, like that's been since finishing 2012. I would speak about the book, and mostly a lot of what I would get from people, or the most poignant and pressing question is like, what do we do? What do I do? People would ask me all the time. And so since finishing the book, that's really been where my focus has been. Sort of like not as much focused on the spiritual and the astral and the etheric and this channel and that Pleiadian possibility, but more about like what are we as people participating in this process? How do we understand it? How do we make changes in our own lives? And how do we also I think very important is how do we learn to explain what's happening once we've understood it to other people? Because like everyone, when I look at all of you people in this room, like everybody is not just you as an individual. You all represent like a whole community, a whole tribe of people that you interact with, that are your family, your friends, your relations, your work communities. So when you learn something new and important, and maybe even essential for survival potentially, you become a responsible agent, a kind of carrier of information who can then help other people to see the situation differently and begin to make changes. So, in 2012, I had predicted. Not just it's not it's like for me, it's like I don't consider myself like a great original thinker. I'm more of a synthesizer. But in looking over a lot of different philosophies, historical analyses, and then some of this Mayan calendar material, like Carl Johan Kalaman's version of it. I had predicted socioeconomic collapse or crisis around the year 2008, and lo and behold, it came. And of course, I'm totally unprepared for it, as I'm sure like everybody is. Like I had this whole idea of things that I would have liked to have gotten done before this happened, but they didn't happen. I don't have a farm to go to. I don't know how to grow a stick of broccoli. But I may have to learn. Who knows? In the next few years. So I think like. What's really happened right now, and it's like a reverberating shockwave, is the global capitalist system has actually ended. Capitalism has self-destructed, and that's pretty extraordinary. And something that it's going to take a lot of people a while to kind of integrate. So that having happened opens up this amazing opportunity to ask. What comes next, And I think that when we're in a transition period like we are now, one of the most important things are cultural narratives, cultural mythologies, stories. So there's this amazing opportunity to kind of re-story, what's been happening on the planet, and to offer a counter narrative and kind of counter strategies and different types of approaches to the situation. Should I keep yapping, or do you want to ask like a comment or question or anything like that? Yeah, go ahead.
I had a question about, you were saying how we do represent whole groups of people, and there are a lot of people who said, oh, that sounds like a great conference, go tell me what they said. And so I find myself often asked about 2012, and I find myself challenged on how to present it not in a fearful way, but there are fearful things that are happening because things are disintegrating, but I've struggled with how to give people hope and see the vision of the beauty that this destruction ultimately leads to. Do you have any recommendations on how to infuse some joy into disseminating information that is on the surface fearful, but at its base joyful?
I also completely struggle with that like all the time, and oscillate in my own mind from being like extremely hopeful to extremely fearful. So I think that the best thing that we can do is like kind of be authentic as much as possible about where we are. But I mean in my public pronouncements and with the media and so on, I certainly make my best attempt to put forward the positive aspects primarily, and I think like it's going to be very hard for people who don't have any conception of like a spirit, any kind of spiritual dimension to human experience, anything beyond the ego, it's going to be very, very hard for those people to see this transition as a positive one. However, I think that most people, in their base nature, in their essence, have a different conception. Have a kind of awareness, however much suppressed it is, that beyond the individual ego, there's like other processes going on. So like for me, we could see this as a kind of initiatory process for the human psyche, and part of it is getting beyond our kind of infatuation and obsession with ego and greed and materialism, so that we begin to figure out how to work together, to collaborate, to create communities that are able to function and work together. So in a way, things like only get good when they get difficult sometimes. If I look at my own life, like I never made progress unless I hit, some speed bumps, unless there was some crisis or difficulty, illness can be an amazing opportunity for growth, and I think also deep down, most people, maybe everybody really, is aware that there's something, there are fundamentally wrong things about the direction that our society has taken, and they tend now, we're in this election cycle, so then people tend to project that onto this particular election, it's like, oh, if this guy gets elected, but that's not, for me, that's totally meaningless, essentially, because the, close to totally meaningless, because it's the whole system itself. You have to be able to look at it in a longer frame analysis. Go back to the way the government of this country was created. It wasn't ever created to be a direct democracy where people were given responsibility to manifest their own creative participatory lives in a community. It was created to be basically a kind of elective oligarchy where leadership and rulership was held under an elite class of people who had wealth and privilege. So that's kind of where we're at. And there may be a much deeper process is going to have to take place before we come back into balance, in a society that is sensible, So I guess one thing that I think is helpful at this point is to try to develop, ways of talking to people about specific issues, because I think a lot of people are becoming aware of climate change or the problems in the economic system or peak oil, resource depletion and so on, and those are really going to require community-based solutions. So there's one model from England that I've been reading a lot about and thinking about and sort of hoping to apply through a social network that I'm working on creating called Transition Town. You can go online and you can read about Transition Town, and it's a model where you get like your local community, just start meetings, you can do it through meetup.com or whatever, you get people interested in, the effects that climate change, peak oil, economic dislocation are going to have, in your local community, and then it's not an oppositional model. It's more like a permaculture model. You use what's available in terms of resources, people, manpower, but then you even go to local government and you're like, and you engage in a dialogue about the kinds of changes that are necessary. And I think some places in the U.S. there's groups that have adapted this model. One is called there's Transition Town Portland. I think there's one in Portland. There's probably a bunch of different models out there. That seems like one of the best and most developed. Because I think that the way to counteract a kind of generalized freak-out anxiety is with specific, things that people can do. You want to take a mic?
You mentioned that you synthesize a lot of data, and I think a lot of times we need a good synthesizer because there's so much cross currents of information that is coming at you from many different sources, and you need to sift through them and focus on what has substance and what's not. So within that context, I'm very much interested to hear some of your comments regarding some of the earth changes that are coming, and particularly the implications for the, the coastal areas like the West Coast or the East Coast. From everything that you hear, what are some of the things that you have found to have substance, to prepare for?
So, yeah, I mean, I don't pretend to be a geologist or to know, and I don't think anybody at this point, really knows what's going to happen. There is some information that seems potentially valid to me that is, not pleasant or good or fun to hear or to think about. Which would be that, we'll see, a more rapid rising of the sea levels are possible. There's a book called With Fear and Violence: Why Climate Scientists Fear Tipping Points in Climate Systems, I think, by Fred Pierce, and he notes that there's, that they're learning more and more that it seems to be an exponential acceleration of factors, and that a large scale change in climate can happen in about 10 years. On the other hand, we just learned from NASA that the solar winds have stopped on the sun, and that often leads to a mini ice age on the Earth. So maybe the sun is giving us a break for 10 years or something. We don't know what's going to happen. I mean, for me, one aspect of it potentially is that these Earth changes are also linked to the development or evolution of human consciousness and the human psyche.